And I was stationed out of Norfolk, and I was out of Norfolk a whole lot more than I was in Norfolk. In fact, the place we finally lived, I had been at sea for so long that she had to meet me at the ship and show me where we lived. I didn't even know where we lived. We'd gotten a furnished apartment. We had a bed. She'd bought a 4-poster bed, which we still have. We had a card table, 2 chairs, and a used sofa, and some kitchen utensils. We had less than most of my kids took to college as freshmen, and she was teaching junior high. She worked 10 months out of the year, and they paid her $260 a month. And so the saving the $2,000, while today doesn't sound like much, it took us a while to save that. I had a 3-year obligation, and they wanted me to stay in the Navy. And I agreed to stay in the Navy an extra year if they'd give me shore duty. And so they gave me shore duty at the Naval Ordnance Plant in Macon, Georgia. We decided to have a baby, and Yule was born. Back then, the father was never allowed in the delivery room. I remember that I came back and she had just delivered. And so I dashed up to the delivery room, and I was standing outside the door there, and he brought him out, and he was still, had some blood on him, and pulled him back and said, "Look, it's a boy." And he hadn't been circumcised, and the doctor says, "Yeah, we're gonna fix him up, we're gonna circumcise him with pinking shears." So I just remember that. I had some close fraternity brothers that lived in Macon, so we had a gay social life. We had a good social life in Macon. But then the Korean War had ended, and I decided that I did not want to be an engineer. I decided I want to go and get a business degree. And I guess I wrote to the University of North Carolina because I really wanted to go there. I'd never been on campus, but it was something about just getting out of Georgia. When I would come up there and visit my aunt, it was just, I just felt more at home in North Carolina than I did in Georgia, to be frank about it. At that particular time, the program was only a 1-year program if you had an undergraduate degree in business. So all during the time I was in the service, I'd gone to night school. In fact, I took my final exam in accounting the night that Yule was born. Made 8 in it too. They gave me a business fellowship at the Keenan Flagler, at the business school at Chapel Hill at that time. All a business fellowship did was to let me pay in-state tuition, which was a big advantage. And I had the GI Bill. And because I had gotten that fellowship, they let me out 6 months early. I left in December of '57 and was glad to get out. It had not been so that I really felt like that it had been a useful experience from the standpoint of learning or advancing myself. My 2 agendas were to be with Peggy and build a family and a relationship with her, and to advance myself professionally. And I just didn't feel like that the Navy, up until I finally got some shore duty, gave me much opportunity to do that. And we moved over to Glen Lennox. And we loved Glen Lennox. But I remember she was talking about how she had to budget so much because she had $50 to pay for a month's groceries. My daddy gave me a black TV set, and it was the only TV set in our little quadrangle there where we lived at Glen Lennox. And I remember that we'd put it out on the back steps, and the neighbors would come around and watch it. We'd watch it black and white television. And I remember that somebody would fire up a charcoal fire there in the back, and we'd all use the charcoal. I graduated from Chapel Hill, and my goal was to take the highest starting salary in my class. And I tied with another guy at $550 a month. And we went down to Charleston, South Carolina. Peggy got pregnant with Ruth, and she was born just about 9 months after we moved there. As soon as Ruth got old enough, which might have been 6 months old, she took her down to Jackson. I remember her getting off the Eastern Airline stairs coming down, and Ewell running to meet his daddy, and how exciting it was, little kid coming in. And she had this pretty baby, Ruth. Ruth was always pretty, in her arms. And so I remember her coming home, and we sat down for supper, and she looked at me and she says, "Bob, I'm gonna have another baby." And that was Laura, and Laura was born almost exactly, it's 13 months after Ruth. I had already decided that I wanted to leave the company. The top manager of the company, which was on Wall Street in New York, had selected groups of people, selected group that they wanted to consider for advancement in management. And there was about 5 of us that were selected to be evaluated, which was an honor. We had a series of tests that we had to do. It took 3 or 4 days to do the testing. So I remember going in there, sitting down at the desk, and he was looking at the paper. He'd look at me, he'd look at the paper. And he finally looked back up at me and he said, "Mr. Culbertson, based on your score, I have no idea how you've accomplished all the things that you've accomplished." Well, there I came back again, you know, that I couldn't, whatever was the defect that I had that I never could understand having at that time, it came back up again. So I decided then and there that it was time for me to leave. So I went back to Chapel Hill and see my faculty advisor who had been so good to me. He said, "I have a friend of mine who has a construction company there in Greensboro by the name of Key Homes," and says, "Get in touch with him." So I did, and ended up accepting a job. Laura was a month or 2 old. Ruth was 14 months old. Ewell by then would have been 4 years old. We did not have regular help. Peggy would tell you the story though. I mean, she's a strong woman. Bless her heart. I mean, she said, "Go on, I'll take care of things." I knew she was gonna make out okay. And also, I was desperate to succeed. And she knew that I loved her dearly. And she knew that whatever we did, it was us together. So after about 4 months, 3 months, something like that, with them, one day I got a call from Shep Griswold, who was the president of the company. He said, "Bob, I'm pulling out, I'm gonna form my own company, and I want you to go with me as Secretary Treasurer of the company." So I said, "Why not?" He was the guy I'd been reporting to anyway. You know, I didn't know what was going on. It was an opportunity for me that I wasn't going to turn down. Why not? I was gone everywhere, all the time anyway. Well, no sooner had we done that, and we were sued. I remember I was sued. I had a net worth of maybe $10,000, and I remember I was sued for $2 million. Well, they settled the suit by agreeing that we would move north of Maryland for a period of 9 months. So Shep said, "Okay, we're all going to Philadelphia." And I went and got Peggy. And I remember because the babies were so small that it was easier to travel at night. And we rented a little house in Broomall, which is right next to Wayne, Pennsylvania, and we moved up there. On the weekends, it commenced to snow. We had a lot of snow. I had never been around snow. And I remember that Ewell was about 4 then. When it snowed, I would get the sled, and up and down that hill we would go. And they'd say, "Isn't that nice, Mr. Culbertson out there playing with his son?" Well, what they didn't realize, the first time I'd ever been on a sled. I'd never been on a sled before until then. And during the time we were up there, during the 9 months we were there, the bottom fell out of the shell home business. The company folded. I said, "Peggy, we moved 7 times the first 8 years we were married, and we'd moved 7 times. I said, "I'll make a living anywhere in the world you want to go. Where do you want to go?" I knew where she wanted to go. we wanted to come back to Piedmont, North Carolina. That I would change jobs at the drop of a hat, and because I was wanting advancement. And I had a partner who would stick with me.